She thought her life was secure, married, respected, and standing beside the man she trusted most. But sometimes, the deadliest betrayals come not from strangers, but from those closest to us. One summer evening by the cliffs, what began as a peaceful moment turned into a nightmare. A shove, a scream, and the violent crash of waves swallowed her whole. It wasn't an accident. It was cold, calculated cruelty, carried out by the woman her own husband had secretly chosen over her. But fate had other plans. Just when her life seemed to vanish beneath the water, a powerful stranger, a billionaire no one expected, dove in to pull her back from death's grip. She was born into a world that rarely gave her anything easily, yet she carried herself with a quiet grace that commanded respect wherever she went. Her name was Alana, a black woman of striking beauty, not just in her appearance, but in the strength of her character. She grew up in a small coastal town where the sea was both a source of wonder and warning. Its crashing waves whispered stories of survival, resilience, and danger. From a young age, Alana understood resilience better than most. Her mother, a single parent, worked tirelessly to keep food on the table. Watching her mother sacrifice so much instilled in Alana the unshakable belief that dignity was something earned, not granted. She was determined to carve out her own path, and that determination fueled her every step. Through years of persistence, she worked her way through school, then college, and finally found herself at the edge of a life she thought she'd always dreamed of. Marriage to a man who promised her the world. His name was Charles. To outsiders, he seemed perfect, handsome, successful, and persuasive. He came from a family with money and connections, and when he courted Alana, he showered her with gestures that felt like dreams come true. Candlelit dinners, surprise flowers, whispered promises of a future that sounded brighter than anything she'd known. For a woman who had fought so hard to prove herself, Charles's attention felt like validation, like she had finally found someone who saw her worth. The wedding was a grand affair, a display of wealth and charm that dazzled everyone. Guests whispered about how radiant Alana looked in her gown, how lucky Charles was to marry a woman so elegant, so grounded. But behind the champagne toasts and glittering smiles, small cracks had already begun to form. At first, it was subtle. Charles's wandering eyes at social events, the way he dismissed her ideas with a sharp laugh, or the moments he prioritized his career and friends over their marriage. Alana brushed these off as the growing pains of married life. She told herself that all couples faced challenges and that love meant patience. She leaned on the lessons her mother had taught her. That strength wasn't just about surviving hardship, but about believing you could overcome it. But as the years passed, the cracks widened. Charles became more distant, his absences longer, his excuses thinner. Alana often found herself waiting alone in their large, quiet house, staring out at the restless sea beyond their window. Something was changing, and though she felt it deeply, she couldn't put a name to it. Then came Cassandra. Cassandra entered their lives under the guise of friendship. She was charming, beautiful in a polished, deliberate way, and seemed to have an uncanny ability to make people feel at ease. Alana welcomed her at first, believing in the goodness of giving others a chance. She invited Cassandra to dinners, introduced her to friends, and even shared private details of her struggles with Charles. What Alana didn't see, what she couldn't imagine, was the slow, deliberate way Cassandra positioned herself closer to Charles. Whispers behind closed doors, lingering touches, stolen glances that grew bolder when they thought Alana wasn't watching. The betrayal, when it came, wasn't a thunderclap, but a series of small storms building in silence. One night, Alana found messages on Charles's phone. Messages full of affection and intimacy that had no place outside a marriage. The words weren't just damning. They were cruel, filled with the kind of passion Charles had once reserved for her alone. Alana's world tilted. She confronted Charles, expecting at least guilt, perhaps regret. Instead, he responded with coldness, deflecting her questions, twisting her pain into accusations of paranoia. Cassandra remained ever present, her smile sharper now, her eyes glinting with something far less friendly than before. But Alana, despite the heartbreak, tried to hold on. She wanted to believe her marriage could be repaired. She wanted to believe that love was still possible. After all, she had built her life around this man, sacrificed so much to stand by his side. To walk away felt like failure. Still, the weight of betrayal gnawed at her spirit. Nights became sleepless, meals went untouched, and her once bright laughter grew rare. The sea outside her window seemed louder than ever, echoing her turmoil. Then came the fateful evening. Charles had invited her on a short getaway, a weekend trip by the cliffs overlooking the ocean. He claimed it was a chance to rekindle what they had lost, to find a fresh start. Against her better judgment, Alana agreed. Deep down, she still clung to hope. Fragile though it was, the setting was beautiful. The cliffs stood tall, the waves crashed rhythmically below, and the sunset painted the horizon in shades of fire and gold. To anyone else, it was paradise. To Alana, it felt like a test. One final chance to see if her marriage could be saved. Cassandra, however, was there too. She arrived under the pretense of helping with arrangements, but her presence cast a long, unwelcome shadow over everything. Alana noticed the smirks, the whispers, the way Charles's attention lingered far too long on Cassandra's every word. The getaway that was meant to heal only deepened the wounds. That evening, as the sky darkened and the stars began to appear, Alana found herself standing near the edge of the cliffs. The sea below roared wild and untamed. Cassandra walked up beside her, her voice low and filled with a venom Alana had never heard so openly before. She spoke of Charles, of how he deserved someone who understood him better, someone who could give him the life he wanted. Her words weren't just cruel, they were calculated. Each one meant to cut deeper than the last. Alana, stunned, tried to walk away, but Cassandra followed, and then it happened. A sudden shove, a scream lost to the night. Alana's body plunged into the icy depths below, swallowed by the merciless sea. But fate was not finished with her story. Beneath the chaos of betrayal and crashing waves, destiny was about to intervene in the most unexpected way, through the hands of a stranger whose power and wealth meant he could change her life forever. A man who would dive headfirst into danger not just to save her body, but to alter the course of her future. A billionaire who refused to let her drown. The sea swallowed her with a violence that stole the air from her lungs. Icy waves crashed over her, dragging her into darkness. For a terrifying moment, Alana thought this was how her story would end. Betrayed by the man she loved, erased by the woman who despised her, and forgotten beneath the weight of water and silence. But fate refused to let her go. Through the roar of waves, another sound emerged, the splash of someone diving in. Strong arms reached for her, pulling her upward, fighting against the current with a determination that felt almost otherworldly. Alana, half-conscious, clung instinctively to the warmth of her rescuer, her last fragments of strength fading into trust. When she finally broke the surface, the night sky greeted her, dotted with stars and the faint glow of the cliffs. She gasped for air, coughing, her chest burning as if it had been torn open. The man who carried her didn't speak, but his presence radiated calm strength. With powerful strokes, he guided her toward safety. On the rocky shore, Alana collapsed onto the sand, shivering and breathless. Her rescuer draped his jacket around her shoulders, his eyes sharp and filled with a mix of concern and fury. He was no ordinary passerby. His presence commanded attention, his tailored shirt clinging to him from the sea, his every movement deliberate and precise. His name was Dominic Hale. To the world, he was a billionaire investor, a man whose name appeared in headlines for transforming businesses and building empires. To Alana, in that moment, he was simply the man who had pulled her back from death's grip. Dominic had been at the cliffs that evening for his own reasons, a rare moment of solitude before finalizing a major deal that would change his company's future. He hadn't expected to witness such cruelty, but when he saw Alana's body hurled into the sea, something inside him refused to stand by. Without hesitation, he dove in, risking his own life to save hers. Alana's body trembled as she tried to make sense of what had happened. Her mind reeled with betrayal, her husband's coldness, Cassandra's venom, the cruel push that sent her spiraling into the abyss. And now this stranger, a man of unimaginable power and wealth, was offering her the second chance fate had nearly denied her. Dominic spoke little that night, but his silence carried weight. He didn't ask questions immediately. Instead, he made sure she was warm, safe, and breathing steadily. Only when her shivers subsided did his eyes meet hers with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way Charles never had. "Who did this to you?" his gaze seemed to ask, though the words never passed his lips. Alana couldn't bring herself to answer aloud. Shame pressed heavily on her chest. Shame for being betrayed, for staying in a marriage that had hollowed her, for trusting people who wanted her gone. But deep inside, a new flame sparked. She was alive. And now she had a witness, someone who had seen the depths of cruelty with his own eyes. In the days that followed, Alana's recovery became more than physical. Dominic arranged discreet medical attention, making sure her near drowning remained hidden from the gossip-hungry public. He gave her space to breathe, yet his presence lingered at the edges of her days, steady and unyielding. News of her absence circulated quietly. Charles told mutual friends that Alana had left to clear her head, spinning lies with practiced ease. Cassandra smiled smugly at social gatherings, convinced her rival had been eliminated. Her path to Charles now unobstructed, but what neither of them realized was that Alana was watching. With Dominic's resources, she gained access to truth she had never imagined. Bank statements, secret property transfers, hidden communications. Charles and Cassandra's affair was only part of the betrayal. They had been plotting far worse. Cassandra had encouraged Charles to divert funds, launder assets, and manipulate Alana's position as his wife to cover his tracks. To them, she wasn't just an obstacle to their relationship. She was a pawn in their schemes, disposable once she had served her purpose. The revelations hit like tidal waves. Each document, each piece of evidence tore away the last fragments of loyalty Alana had clung to. But instead of breaking her, the betrayal forged her into steel. Dominic watched this transformation quietly. He offered support without controlling her, power without demanding gratitude. He admired the way she carried her pain, turning it into resolve. Something about her resilience resonated deeply with him. For a man who lived in boardrooms and battled corporate giants, seeing a woman stand against such personal treachery stirred respect and something more unspoken. Alana began to plan. No longer would she be silent, waiting for Charles to choose her, or Cassandra to leave her in peace. This time she would confront them on her own terms, with truth as her weapon. Dominic offered his assistance, not as a savior, but as an ally. "If you're ready," his presence implied, "I'll make sure your voice is heard." Together, they orchestrated a quiet investigation. Lawyers, private investigators, and discreet allies uncovered years of deception. Charles's public image as a charming, successful businessman was nothing more than a mask. Behind it lay debts, fraud, and scandals waiting to be exposed. Cassandra, with her carefully cultivated allure, was complicit in every scheme. The more evidence Alana gathered, the clearer her path became. Yet the weight of what she was about to do pressed heavily on her. Exposing Charles meant dismantling the very life she had once fought to build. Revealing Cassandra's cruelty meant facing the memory of being shoved into the sea. It wasn't just about justice. It was about reclaiming her dignity. Dominic's presence became a quiet anchor. Though he never pushed, his unwavering support reminded her she was no longer alone. For the first time in years, Alana felt like she had someone in her corner, someone who saw her not as a possession, not as a liability, but as a force in her own right. The stage was set for confrontation. Charles, oblivious to the storm brewing, prepared for a lavish business gala, a night meant to cement his reputation and secure new investors. Cassandra, draped in jewels and arrogance, planned to stand proudly by his side, flaunting her victory. They believed Alana was gone, erased from the narrative. But Alana, stronger than ever, was about to prove them wrong. At the edge of that glittering night, she would step into the light with the truth in her hands, ready to strip away their masks before the world. What began as betrayal on a cliffside would end in a reckoning so public, so undeniable, that neither Charles nor Cassandra would ever escape it. And by her side, silent but unshakable, would stand the man who had saved her from drowning. not just in the sea, but in her own despair. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, laughter, and the clink of crystal glasses. Charles had spared no expense for his grand gala, a night designed to showcase his success, charm, and power. Business elites, politicians, and socialites filled the room, each one eager to bask in the glow of his supposed brilliance. At his side, Cassandra sparkled like a jewel, draped in a gown that shimmered under the golden light. To the world, they looked unstoppable, the perfect couple. But the truth was already seeping through the cracks, waiting to explode. Behind the velvet curtains, Alana stood tall, her heart pounding like a drum. Gone was the fragile woman who once stared out at the sea in silence. In her place stood a figure of strength, dressed in elegance that carried quiet authority. Her hair, her stance, her very presence radiated resilience. The billionaire who had saved her life, Dominic Hale, stood nearby, not as a shadow but as a silent pillar of support. The night's speeches began with Charles's voice booming across the hall. He spoke of vision, of legacy, of building a future that others could only dream of. The audience nodded, applauded, intoxicated by his performance. Cassandra leaned close to him, her smile smug, her hand brushing against his, as though sealing their alliance in front of the world. And then, the moment arrived. As Charles prepared to unveil his latest investment success, the large screens behind him flickered. Instead of graphs and promises of profit, documents appeared. Bank transfers, hidden accounts, property deeds signed in Cassandra's name. Each image lingered long enough for whispers to ripple through the room. The crowd stirred uneasily. Murmurs rose into gasps. Charles faltered, his polished smile slipping for the first time. Cassandra's face blanched, her hand frozen mid-air. Then came the voice. Steady, clear, and unmistakable. I think everyone here deserves the truth. Every head turned. Alana stepped into the light, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her gown flowing like a tide reclaiming the shore. Her eyes, sharp as steel, locked onto Charles and Cassandra. Gasps filled the room. Some guests whispered her name in shock. The wife they thought had disappeared. The woman Charles claimed had abandoned him. Charles Arthur built this night on lies, Alana continued, her voice resonating across the hall. For years he pretended to be a man of vision. But behind the charm was theft, betrayal, and fraud. And all of it supported by the woman standing so proudly at his side. On cue, more documents appeared. Emails between Charles and Cassandra, recordings of their plans, even photographs that exposed their affair. The evidence was undeniable. Cassandra stepped forward, her voice trembling but laced with venom. You don't know what you're talking about. Alana, you're jealous, bitter. You're nothing without him. Her words were cut short as another image filled the screen, a security recording from the cliffs. Grainy but clear, it showed Cassandra pushing Alana into the sea. The room erupted. Gasps turned into shouts. Chairs scraped against the floor as people stood in disbelief. Charles staggered backward, his face pale, sweat beading on his brow. This isn't real, he stammered, but the crowd was no longer his audience. They were his jury. Alana's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. I nearly died because of you. Because of your greed, your betrayal, your cruelty. But I survived. And tonight, I take back everything you tried to steal. My dignity, my truth, and my voice. The audience erupted in applause, not just for the drama, but for the courage standing before them. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled furiously, and investors quietly slipped away, their confidence in Charles shattering with every second. Cassandra's mask crumbled. She screamed, lunged toward Alana, but security restrained her. The image of her pushing Alana into the sea replayed behind them, her denial drowned by her own actions. Charles tried to salvage the moment, begging for composure, but the once supportive crowd turned on him. Business partners whispered of legal action, former allies distanced themselves, and murmurs of police involvement rippled like a storm across the room. Through it all, Alana stood unshaken. She did not scream, did not falter. Her calm strength spoke louder than any words. And beside her, Dominic's quiet presence reminded everyone that she was not only a survivor, she was a woman with power now standing firmly in her corner. By the end of the night, Charles and Cassandra were no longer the glittering pair admired by all. They were disgraced, exposed, and cornered by the truth they thought they had buried. The empire Charles had flaunted crumbled before his very eyes, reduced to ashes in a single evening, and Alana, once silenced and betrayed, walked out of the gala not as a victim, but as the woman who turned her pain into justice. The morning after the gala, the city awoke to headlines that crackled with scandal. Newspapers screamed, "CEO exposed in fraud and attempted murder plot," while television anchors replayed the damning footage of Cassandra pushing Alana into the sea. Online forums buzzed with disbelief, and business channels picked apart Charles's empire, dismantling it piece by piece. For Charles and Cassandra, the fall was swift and merciless. Once adored, now they were hunted. By lawyers, by creditors, by the very public that had once applauded them. Cassandra was arrested first, her face plastered across every screen as she was escorted in handcuffs. Her shrieks of denial did little to erase the image of her betrayal. Charles followed soon after, his name synonymous with fraud, betrayal, and cowardice. The empire he had built through deceit collapsed like a house of cards, leaving nothing but ruins. And while the world devoured the scandal, Alana chose a different path. She stood by the sea once more. The same waves that had nearly claimed her life now whispering a different story. The scars of betrayal were still etched deep inside her, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they served as reminders of her strength, of the storm she had survived and conquered. Dominic joined her at the shoreline, silent for a long moment as they both listened to the rhythm of the tide. Unlike Charles, his presence was not loud or domineering. It was steady, grounded, like an anchor in waters that once threatened to drown her. "You didn't just survive," Dominic finally said, his voice low. "You reclaimed everything they tried to take from you." Alana turned, her gaze soft but resolute. "I had to. If I stayed silent, they would have written my story for me. But now, it's mine." And it was. Over the weeks that followed, Alana transformed not only her life but also her purpose. She invested her time and resources into building support networks for women who had suffered betrayal, abuse, and injustice. Her story became more than a scandal. It became a beacon of resilience. Invitations poured in from media outlets, conferences, and advocacy groups. Yet Alana accepted only those that aligned with her vision, turning pain into empowerment. She spoke, not as the woman betrayed by her husband's lover, but as the woman who refused to be erased. Her words carried the weight of truth, drawing strength from the very vulnerability others tried to weaponize against her. As for Dominic, his role in her life deepened quietly. He did not overshadow her, nor did he rescue her. Instead, he stood beside her, recognizing her strength even before she fully embraced it herself. Their connection grew not from drama or spectacle, but from mutual respect and understanding. Where Charles sought to control, Dominic chose to empower. The world noticed. At future galas and gatherings, whispers no longer circled around Charles and Cassandra's rise. They now marveled at Alana's glow, her grace, and her unshakable presence. She walked into rooms not as a woman defined by betrayal, but as one who had turned it into power. Even the sea seemed to echo her transformation. Once a place of fear, it became a place of renewal. Alana often returned to it, standing at the water's edge, her reflection dancing on the waves. It reminded her that life, like the ocean, could be both cruel and beautiful, but within it lay endless possibilities for rebirth. In time, Charles and Cassandra faded into obscurity, remembered only as cautionary tales of greed and cruelty. Their downfall was total, their legacy shattered. But Alana's name endured, not because of the scandal, but because of what she built afterward. Her story closed not with bitterness, but with triumph. Not with vengeance, but with victory. Because when she was pushed into the sea, the world expected her to drown. Instead, she rose from the depths, stronger than ever. A woman who reclaimed her dignity, rewrote her destiny, and stood as proof that no betrayal, no cruelty could silence the truth forever.